Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Germany. He is there to negotiate the US-backed peace deal with Russia. He's meeting US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner for the talks. And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are also expected to take part in the talks. But the host of these talks, Merz, struck a pessimistic note just one day prior. On Saturday, Merz spoke at the party conference of his political ally, the Christian Social Union.
The decades of the Pax Americana are largely over for us in Europe, and also for us in Germany as well. It no longer exists as we knew it, and nostalgia won't change that. And I would be one of the last people who wouldn't gladly indulge in that nostalgia. But it's no use. That's the way it is. The Americans are now very, very ruthlessly pursuing their own interests.
Merz says that Europe's days of safety under the American security umbrella are over. He added that the Americans are now pursuing their own agenda, and that too ruthlessly. Merz believes that this marks the end of the post-World War II international order and that Europe needs to look after itself now. The German Chancellor's comment came in the wake of America's new national security strategy. In the document, Washington was extremely critical of the European Union in particular. The Trump administration believes that Europe will be unrecognizable in the next 20 years and is on the verge of civilizational destruction. The US says that because of these factors, some European allies will remain reliable. It says they will not have the economic or military potential to support American interests. The security strategy coincides with the new deadline. The US wants Europe to take over most of NATO's conventional defense capabilities by 2027. NATO, which stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is a bedrock of the post-World War II order. It has been the US-led Western security umbrella, and America doesn't seem to want to hold up that umbrella anymore. Merz seemed to acknowledge that in his speech, and his worry was that without the US, Europe was directly in the crosshairs of Putin.
Yes, we are not at war, but we no longer live in peace either, and we must be clear about that.
Merz fears that Putin will not stop at Ukraine. He hinted that territorial concessions won't be enough to appease the Russian president, and the German Chancellor used an example from his own country to emphasize the point. Merz spoke about the Munich Agreement of 1938. That's when Britain, France and Italy allowed Adolf Hitler to annex parts of the present-day Czech Republic. Hitler had demanded Czech land inhabited by Germans. It was known as the Sudetenland. Hitler promised it would be his last territorial claim in Northern Europe. The other nations took him at his word and decided to give in. This was on September 30th, 1938, just about 1 year before World War II began. So Merz compared Putin to Hitler. The German Chancellor claims that Putin's goal is to change the borders of Europe and eventually restore the old Soviet Union by invoking the crisis in Sudetenland. Merz warned that Putin cannot be stopped with concessions, and he said it was now up to Europe to defend itself. Dr. Glenn Diesen is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He's now joining us live on the broadcast from Oslo, Norway. Dr. Diesen, it's good to see you and thank you very much for making time for us. Do you think Chancellor Friedrich Merz is right when he says that Europe can be ready to defend itself without the United States?
Well, it's going to be much more difficult. That is, after 80 years of outsourcing strategic thinking and security to the United States, it's going to be very hard for the Europeans to develop any autonomy. And there's always the problem that the United States has always functioned as a pacifier. That is, if the Europeans should start to militarize, keep in mind that there's 27 member states in the European Union. Not everyone will be happy to see the return of German military power. So the Europeans might start to compete against each other yet again. And so I think this is the main problem. But of course, much of this is premised, I think, on nonsense. That is, Putin is not Hitler, but we have political leaders across the West who consistently refer to all their opponents as Hitler. That is, Milosevic was Hitler, Saddam Hussein was Hitler, Gaddafi was Hitler, Assad was Hitler, now Putin is Hitler. And the only page from their history book appears to be 1938. So we often see the purpose, if not the consequence of this, is that war becomes then the only path to peace, because diplomacy and compromise is dismissed as this dangerous appeasement. Now, if you ask me, I think this is a lot of emotional sloganeering. It doesn't really make much sense at all, because we have to keep in mind that Russia never laid any claims to Ukraine before 2014. And it was a well-known fact for 30 years that NATO expansionism into Ukraine was considered to be an existential threat for Russia. This is why Germany's own Chancellor, Angela Merkel, made the point that threatening to expand NATO to Ukraine would be interpreted by Moscow as a declaration of war. So that we suddenly turn around now and say that Russia is suddenly on the prowl, it just wants to conquer new territory, doesn't really make much sense. It's this new German leader, Merz, that refuses to end NATO expansionism. He refuses to talk to Russia now, and the goal is still the strategic defeat of Russia. So I think there's a lot of logical holes in these arguments. But again, the main point is to frame one side as good, the other one as evil, and thus encourage to more war. And I think he's successful to this extent.
Dr. Diesen, let's talk about NATO, because there are two developments here. There is word that America may be withdrawing from the NATO. What happens if that happens? And there's also a report that says Zelensky has dropped the ambitions of Ukraine joining the NATO. The ramifications of that?
Well, I don't think the United States would leave NATO. It would be very difficult because there's a lot of opposition to this within the political system in the United States. But what I think Trump could do is make the alliance impotent. That is, by questioning to what extent the US would actually come to the aid of the Europeans and also sowing these divisions, which we're seeing now. That is that Trump's pointing to the growing authoritarianism in the EU, the economic decline, the obsession with war, lack of diplomacy, the inability to reproduce its own culture. Now, all of this could be correct, and well, let's say it is correct, but I think it also has a purpose behind it. That is to have a bit of an amicable divorce, not a complete divorce, but for the Europeans to be pushed a little bit into pursuing their own path forward, their own independence. So, but again, I think a lot of this will fuel a lot of uncertainty within Europe, because the Europeans can't possibly aspire to match US military power. And I think so far, part of the strategy of the European leaders has been to create all these narratives of a Russian hybrid war against Europe in order to draw the United States deeper into the war against Russia. But it seems that they're failing towards this end.
All right. Dr. Diesen, it's good to see you. We'll have to end it there. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you.